While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Biohacking, peptides, peptide bioregulators. We've mentioned them on the show. We've talked about them with Dr. Amber Crosgrid, but I wanted to bring on an expert in peptide bioregulators and all things biohacking. So welcome to the show, Ms. Nathalie Niddam.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tim. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, and so I followed your work for a little over a year or so. Tell us a little bit about your journey. What got you interested in health and biohacking and longevity?
Health has always been something I've been interested in. I studied when I was in university, and you can tell I'm Canadian because I use the word university. I studied human physiology, and I've always been pretty committed to the concept that the body is very capable of healing itself if we can kind of figure it out. I had my own health challenges and my own journey kind of along the way, but I was always generally healthy, I thought. It turns out I had lots of stuff going on under the hood from a, C-section birth, no breastfeeding, that kind of beginning, which will right out of the gate kind of do a bit of a number on your microbiome, which as a result affects a lot of things about your health that you don't know about until, nobody really talked about that stuff back in the day. I remember when I was first married, a friend of mine at the time mentioning something about candida overgrowth. And I looked at her like she was crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? And, it just wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
But I was a fitness instructor my whole life, and that kind of kept my hand sort of in this health space because I ended up kind of falling into a career in sales and advertising. And about, I want to say 12, 13 years ago, I woke up one morning and said, I don't want to do that anymore. It just didn't feel, I just didn't care about it that much. And at the time, I was really doing a lot of reading and research on this whole biohacking stuff that was really starting to kind of gain traction. And I was mentioning it to my chiropractor, and he said, and I'd been sharing with him a lot of the stuff that I'd been learning, and he'd been downloading it to his patients. And he goes, Nat, I just shared a bunch of the stuff you told me about the other day, like a couple months ago, to a patient of mine, and he dropped 10 pounds. Like, you should be getting paid to do this. And it kind of like set a light bulb off in my head. I went, it's a really good idea. And so that's when I went back to school and did like an in-class full year accelerated program in holistic nutrition. And then because I kind of had my eye on biohacking, I was like, this nutrition thing's great, but, it didn't seem to be quite enough. So then I joined the first cohort of, at the time, it was called the Bulletproof Human Potential Training Program. So I did that. Then I got really interested in epigenetics. So I did some training there on the epigenetic side. So that's really what kind of was my initial kind of grounding, if you will, in the space. And then I came across peptides a few years ago, and that was kind of fairly impactful. And I've been at it ever since. And, I launched a podcast myself a few years ago, and here we are.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I think, or I at least see you or view you as, on the cutting edge, breaking barriers, especially for women. Because I think in the beginning, like a lot of things or professions, biohacking was mostly male dominated. And so
Mhm.
it just took, some women seeing other women doing it to say, hey, okay, I can do this too. And I think
Mhm.
that's really empowering for the listeners, because we've talked about peptides, but can
Mhm.
you define or tell us the difference between a peptide and a peptide bioregulator?
Sure. So peptides, I mean, and they're different and not that different all at the same time. Bioregulators are peptides. They're a subcategory, if you will, of peptides. And there would be people that would say that a lot of the longer chain peptides are also bioregulators, because the definition of a bioregulator is a peptide that can epigenetically affect the way that your DNA expresses. The only thing is that even when you look at, BPC 157 and how it might influence genes that are turned on and off, what BPC can't do is it can't get into the nucleus of the cell. And that's because it's just too big. The bioregulator peptides are only 2 to 4 amino acids long. And so they're the tiniest of tiny peptides. And so therefore, for that reason, and because of the way they're oriented and charged and a whole bunch of other reasons, they're actually able to cross across the cellular membrane into the nucleus of the cell, which is where your DNA is. And that's where they will bind to specific binding sites on that DNA and upregulate the production of proteins.
Wow. Awesome. So that's taken it, a step further than peptides in general, correct?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at peptides, they are very powerful signaling molecules, right?
Okay.
And so they initiate all of these different cellular cascades in the system that can be, in many cases, very impactful on people's outcome and people's health. With the bioregulators, it's a bit more of it's a slower burn, right? You're not going to necessarily, in some cases you might, rarely, but you don't typically feel what a bioregulator is doing for you in an immediate sense. Whereas, if you're using, look, if you're using one of the GLP-1 agonists that are also peptides, you're likely to feel that very quickly. If you're using something like a BPC 157 and a thymosin beta 4 to help heal an injury, you might notice that injury starts to heal much faster, or you might get relief from pain a bit more quickly, that kind of thing. With a bioregulator, you're going to apply it, but you're not necessarily going to feel much in the short term. And that's because the signal what's happening in your body is essentially a regeneration of tissues and organs at a cellular level. And that's going to take some time. It's not going to happen
Absolutely.
overnight. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that explanation. In general, when we talk about or different categories, basically, of peptide bioregulators, like let's choose ones that benefit the immune system and possibly
Mhm.
enhance thymus rejuvenation. Um, I know it's going to vary from person to person, but would it take, say, 6 months to notice a difference, 8 months?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, honestly, it's going to depend on the individual, and it's never going to be a one-shot deal, right? So meaning that it's never going to be just one thing particularly, but definitely the thymus bioregulator would play a very significant role there. But interestingly enough, there's another bioregulator, which is the pineal gland bioregulator, which also has a very powerful influence on the thymus gland.
Okay,
So
awesome.
both of them together will have an impact, but what would be happening is a general upgrade, if you will, in immune function, but very much so in a restoring homeostasis perspective. And so by that, what I mean is someone in their 20s who still has a functioning thymus gland probably won't notice much, because they don't need it. Right? Where we're going to get the upswing and where the research really shines, especially in this area, is with older, elderly type people, right? So anybody over the age, let's say of 50 or 55, has a lot more, there's a bigger delta between where they want to be and where they are. And so they kind of have more runway, if you will, for improvement.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And so when we talk about, the peptide bioregulators, if let's say you take the two that you just mentioned for the immune system for a year and a half, if you stop them, will the benefits remain, or do you still do maintenance every so often?
Yeah, so first, a point of clarity, you don't typically use these constantly, right? Typically, you're going to use them what's the word I'm
Pulsing
looking for?
dose?
You're going to use them periodically, like in pulses, right? So you might use and very often they're used in stacks. So very often you don't use one, you're going to use 1 to 3, sometimes a couple more. It just depends on the situation. But depending on your age and what's going on, let's say you're a 55-year-old person and you're generally healthy, you don't really have any major issues going on, but you're like, I think I kind of would like to shore up my defenses, because what we want to do at the end of the day is build up resilience in our system so that we can weather the storms that we come across, which, seem to be more numerous as the life goes on. And so what you might do in that case is you might use those two bioregulators for 30 days. And it depends on whether you're using the oral biologic form or if you're using a synthetic form, and we can talk about those as well. But let's say you would use if you're using the oral capsules, you might do a 30-day run of both of those and then repeat that in 6 months, right? If, on the other hand, you're someone and you're still in that same age group or even older, and you've got some immune system, like, you just get sick a lot, like you just know there's some work to be done here. So what you might do is do your 30-day run and then do a bunch of 10-day cycles, 10 days a month for the next 2 to 3 months. Again, depending on the person, it could be longer, it could be shorter. You might do 2 30 days. Like it really depends. But there's definitely what I've learned is, and talking to other people who use these also clinically, there's a lot more art there's a lot of science, but there's a lot of art to how these are applied to each individual.
I know you mentioned just a minute ago about synthetic versus the naturally occurring. Can you touch on that, as well as, are most of the peptide bioregulators PO or by mouth, or are they sub-Q injections?
Yeah, so again, that depends. So if you're using the biological extracts, so basically, where do bioregulators come from? Where they come from, where they were originally sourced and discovered, were in the tissues, glands, and organs of animals. And so what's really interesting about peptide bioregulators is, if you're someone who eats a lot of organs, you're probably getting access to a bunch of bioregulators from those organs, right? But they are tissue specific for the most part. So in order to get the liver bioregulator, you're going to need to eat some liver. To get the heart bioregulator, you're going to need to eat some heart, and so on and so forth. That form is considered a nutritional supplement. And what happens is that the organs are harvested, and then they're refined to the point where you no longer have protein from that animal in the final supplement. All that's really left is the peptide bioregulator and maybe a few cofactors along the way. There's another form of this that is really only available in Russia, which is where the 40 years of research comes from. And that is, it can be injected intramuscularly. But those are very hard to come by outside of Russia. So we don't talk about them that much. But interestingly enough, a lot of the original research was done using that form of the bioregulator, which is ostensibly probably the most powerful. After that, we then get, and one other thing. So I said eating organs is going to give you access to those bioregulators. Using desiccated organ supplements will also give you that access, right? So if you look at a company like, let's say, Paleo Valley or Ancestral Supplements, these guys have supplements that are dried out, desiccated organs of animals. You're going to find, amongst other things, you're going to find peptide bioregulator in there. So super cool. And then finally, you know, if you go to some of the professional brands of supplement manufacturers, and here's where you want to be very careful about quality. You want to make sure that you're sourcing these from a really good company. They have all of those desiccated glands, like desiccated thyroid, desiccated adrenal gland. You'll find a lot of these different things. The only thing with those supplements is that the way that they're processed, and in terms of the things that are in there, in addition to the bioregulator, for example, for thyroid, you're going to end up with some T3, some T4, like you're going to end up with the whole complex for the thyroid, which in many cases can be very beneficial. But the thyroid bioregulator doesn't include that. It only includes the peptide. And the reason why that's an advantage is because the thyroid bioregulator can actually be used whether someone is hypo, like underperforming thyroid, or hyperthyroid. And because in this sense, the bioregulator, that amino acid chain, is really looking to restore homeostasis in the system. So it's kind of safer. But if you're a hypo person and you need all that extra stuff, you might be better off using the desiccated thyroid. Okay, so I kind of interrupted myself. Going back to the synthetic bioregulator and what that's all about is at some point they, you know, it was published and figured out that what is that amino acid chain that's really doing the work. And so they were able to isolate those specific amino acid chains, and now they can be synthesized in a lab. And now they can be applied subcutaneously is one of the most common ways to do it. But increasingly, because these are so tiny and so bioavailable, they can also be taken sublingually, like under the tongue. So there are a number of companies, well, not a number of companies, they are now fairly widely available, most of them as sublingual sprays or drops. There's even a couple of guys that are doing them transdermal. I'm a little old school. I don't buy that necessarily, but it doesn't mean they don't work. But it's just, I'm going to come out with it, my bias. But you know, the synthetic bioregulators can also be, can be very powerful because it's kind of like a cleaner product, if you will, like there's less noise around it. There's no fillers in the capsule. It doesn't have to get through, you know, although they're absorbed directly from the gut, they're still kind of on a journey. The synthetics are often used for people who are sicker and or who are have more sensitive system, let's say, like people with a lot of autoimmune issues. And so in that sense, they might prefer to use, or at least start with, the synthetic bioregulator before introducing the more complete complex. Sorry, that
Awesome.
was a
And
really long answer.
no, it was very thorough. Thank you for that. The example you gave of the thyroid, you said if you use the thyroid, you'll only get the peptide.
No, so the thyroid, interestingly, again, the thyroid, the adrenal, there's 5 bioregulators that are only available as extracts from the gland. And that is probably because, I mean, you know, not having had the full-on conversation with someone, it's probably because either they couldn't isolate the one peptide, or it's because it takes the complex of peptides. And so those ones are not actually available as synthetics. They can only be taken as oral bioregulators. And so, you know, for the pineal gland, for example, we have what's called epitalon or epitalon. And that's the synthetic version of the pineal gland bioregulator, which when you're taking it orally would be called endolutin. You know, the naming of bioregulators leaves a little something to be desired for those of us in you know, English speaking countries. But anyway, that's the way it is. Anyway, that's the short answer.
So what was the example? Sorry, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying about the thyroid. You said it can only be taken as a bioregulator, not an extract.
So it can only be, no, it can only be gotten as an extract. Because they haven't isolated that exact amino acid chain, or even if they have, there's a whole bunch of them and they can't be bothered. So at some level, it can't be synthetic. It's only the oral version that's available. So that's for thyroid. It's true also for adrenal, I think bone marrow, muscle, and then there's one other one. I can't remember which one it is.
Awesome. So in terms of mitochondrial health, like that's a huge topic. It affects everything, obviously. It's extremely important for helping people heal from chronic illness. Oftentimes, they don't heal because they don't have enough ATP, but also performance enhancement and anti-aging. Or I know you said you never, or in general, you don't want to use just one peptide bioregulator. It's usually 2 to 3, sometimes more. Are there ones that target mitochondrial health?
So there's not a mitochondrial bioregulator. However, for sure, epitalon and I think Vilon, which is one of the synthetic immune bioregulators, both of those have been found to improve mitochondrial respiration. So they indirectly might have a positive impact on mitochondrial function. But for athletes, they actually did a really interesting study where they paired the muscle bioregulator. Oh boy, let me see if I can remember this. It was the muscle bioregulator with, I want to say it was the central nervous system bioregulator. And they noticed that those athletes actually, their performance improved. And what you might also throw in there while you're at it. So let's, in terms of thinking how we build these stacks, what do we want to think about when we're supporting athletes? Well, we want to support their immune system because it often takes a beating because the body's using up its resources in other places. So we might add a thymogen in there, like a thymus bioregulator. And then you might also say, well, the problem is the list gets long very quickly, right? Blood flow is very important. So there's a blood vessel bioregulator, which helps to restore function and form to the endothelium of blood vessels and elasticity. So you could make a really strong argument for cycling that blood vessel bioregulator in there. And then, it kind of goes from there. There's a lung one, and the lung might be the one. I wonder if the lung might be one of the 5 that isn't available as a synthetic. No, it is. It's called Bronchogen. Anyway.
And I know it's going to vary from country to country, but in terms of athletes, whether it's, minor league sports, major league sports, are they on the banned substances list? How does that work?
So not to my knowledge. So these bioregulators, actually, the Russians used them post-event, like post-Olympics. So there's a very interesting use case scenario of the women's gymnastics team, where when they measured their biological age after the Olympics, they noticed that these amazing young girls who are super fit and incredibly accomplished had aged faster than their biological age, which is understandable between the stresses and strains and both emotional and physical. Like, you're going to speed up. You're burning the candle at both ends, ostensibly. So what they would do for them is they would definitely have them on the bioregulators maybe ahead of time leading in, and then they would put them on a bioregulator protocol post event to help to basically restore function and mitigate some of the damage. There's actually a really cool case of, I think her name was Tora Birch. Is it Birch? I get her name wrong all the time. Anyway, she's a 2-time gold medal Olympic snowboarder for the US team. And Tora Brock. No, Tora, I don't know. Okay, I may or may not have her name right. I've put her in her slide. I can see her face because I've used her case in many presentations at different events. But her team had tested her biological age for some reason. And this is someone who's had snowboard attached to her feet since she could stand. Right. And at the time, she was 32 years old. She was kind of done competing at a very high level. When they measured her biological age, she was showing up like she was 56. Right. And so she worked very closely with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bill Lawrence. And after, I think it took them about 18 months, and they were able to dial the clock back to her chronological age. Now, bear in mind, she'd also stopped training. She'd stopped training for elite events by then. I'm sure she wasn't sitting around eating bonbons, but she was probably, a lot of the stressors got removed and was leading a healthier lifestyle. But the bioregulators were definitely used to help to restore that biological age.
That's a great story. And that was actually something I was going to bring up. like the Dunedin pay scale and these
Mhm.
epigenetic clocks. True Diagnostic, I know DNA Company has one, but have you used with your clients and people who are interested in anti-aging, checking a baseline and then after, say, a year on peptide bioregulators?
Yeah, so I haven't done it personally. I mean, I do it personally. So my biological age right now is about 8 years younger than my chronological age. And it depends what you're looking at, right? My Dunedin pace is 0.74. And as True Diagnostic moves along, they're becoming more and more sophisticated in what they're measuring. And I do think that it's going to get a lot harder to get a stellar score as they start to dive in to specific organs and tissues and stuff like that. And the last time I did my ohmic age, I wasn't that much, I think I was barely a year younger than my chronological age on that. And so now, having said that, I've had a bunch of different things that have kind of come up for me health-wise over the last year and a half. I've been under a massive amount of stress. I've traveled constantly. I moved, so then I lost my bioregulators. It's
Wow.
like all kinds of stuff happened. So, I'll be interested in a year or so to remeasure and see where I'm at. Now, my telomere age is still at least 20 years younger than my chronological age. So a lot of these metrics are still quite good.
Right.
There is a study, a long-term study that is going on. It's been going on for about 4 years, of people who are on bioregulator peptides, and now they're month in, month out, every month, but they're doing 10-day those 10-day cycles of stacks of bioregulators. So I did it for a full year. And so I'd be on a stack of 3 for 10 days, then another stack of 3 for 10 days, and then another stack of 3 for 10 days. Next month, I'd cycle. And I was basically cycling through all the bioregulators. And that is, that I definitely have a few people in my membership community who are doing this right now. So we'll see in about a year's time how they do. And it'll be also very interesting to see against the more sophisticated aging clocks that True Diagnostic is using now. But what's interesting about all of us people is we're not doing any one thing only, right?
Right.
So I'm just started taking rapamycin. We're all doing lots of different interventions. So it's always a little bit tricky to know exactly what's doing what. But definitely from a telomere perspective, epitalon, the pineal gland bioregulator, one of the mechanisms of action it has is that it helps to activate telomerase. And that's that enzyme that helps to maintain and restore the ends of the telomeres on your DNA. And that, again, from an anti-aging perspective, telomeres are a funny thing. You definitely don't want them to be super short, but you absolutely also don't want super long telomeres, because that's where we start to get into trouble with things like cancer. And what you want is to kind of hit that sweet spot. Epitalon is not going to, remember what I said earlier, it's looking to restore balance. They're not looking to go super physiologic, right? So they're not, it's not that you can grow telomeres on a cell and make it cancerous. It's more that cancer cells have very long telomeres, which is what enables them to just keep replicating like crazy, like they do.
So it's kind of like an adaptogen in a sense that, if it's too high, it'll bring it down. If it's too low, it'll bring it up. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty amazing. You mentioned stress and being under the past year and a half, incredible amount of stress. And I know many people have been, over the past 3 to 4 years. In terms of
Mhm.
targeting, I know you said there's a peptide bioregulator for the central nervous system. Or is there one that helps to mitigate HPA axis dysfunction?
Yeah, so what you might do there is you might use the central nervous system bioregulator, the pineal gland bioregulator. Pineal gland ends up in a lot of stacks simply because it's also a master endocrine balance. It's kind of like the conductor of the endocrine system. So it helps to encourage balance in the endocrine system, right? Which is your hormones. So I would probably say that the pineal gland bioregulator, central nervous system bioregulator, and let's think about that HPA axis. We want to take care of the adrenal glands. We want to take care, even though I will often include T in HPA, HPTA, because thyroid and adrenals are so strongly linked, and
Yep.
one's going to drag the other one up or down. So
Mhm.
I would probably do adrenal, thyroid, central nervous system, and the pineal gland as a starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I've mentioned on the show a few times. So I used to practice in North Carolina with a nurse practitioner, and she would just pop people on Armour thyroid without checking their cortisol. Some of them were on up to 4 grains a day of Armour thyroid. And then when I
Mhm.
saw them, like, Dr. Tim, I'm having heart palpitations, my resting heart rate's like 130. And we checked their cortisol, and it's like, and so, yeah, I mean, that just reinforces your point that, cortisol is too high or too low. It's going to negatively impact the thyroid. And some people will take it a step further and say HPATGG for the gut gonadal axis. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah, it's also interconnected. Um, in terms of using peptide bioregulators for, let's say, someone who has chronic infections, like I know we talked about the ones that can help with the thymus gland, are there ones that help to, say, upregulate natural killer cell levels or specifically target pathogens?
No, so they don't it's not a targeting pathogen thing, right? So that's where you're going to look to peptides. You might look at LL37, something like
Yeah.
that, carefully. Um, so you might want to support the immune system with your pineal gland and your thymus bioregulator, but at the end of the day, the heavy lifting's not going to happen here. It's going to happen on the other side with whatever other strategies you're using to address those things, which may or may not
Absolutely.
be peptides. I mean, there's so many different ways to go, right?
Right, absolutely. And kind of walk us through like your routine on a day-to-day basis in terms of, I know before we started recording, or maybe it was right when we started, you mentioned the PEMF mat that you're sitting on. How many different biohacks do you do? What are your must-haves?
Oh my God. How many different people are going to think I'm certifiable? Um, I think, I mean, what I try to do, and it depends on the day, right? Because this morning I was at my gym. I had to leave my house at 7 a.m. just to get to my gym for 7:30. And I know there's people out there that get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm not a huge, that doesn't necessarily work in my world. But I start my day every single day, non-negotiable with red light. So it's generally dark when I wake up. So if I'm up at 6:30 or 6:15 or whatever the case may be, I walk into my bathroom and turn on that red light panel. And that's the first thing I do of the day. And I'll keep it on while I'm getting myself ready, that kind of thing. The other next thing after that is probably I will generally do a session on my PMF mat. This morning I didn't have time because I had to get to the gym. So the cool thing is my PMF mat comes with a mini and a maxi. I'm sitting on the mini, it's on my chair, so I get to do it while I'm working. I'll take you through today. I went to the gym, and after the gym, and I actually haven't done these yet, but I will shortly from a recovery perspective, because I'm lifting very heavy a couple of times a week. I'll throw my Katsu bands on after my workout, and that'll help with my recovery. Interestingly enough about Katsu is it also helps with those blood vessels with circulation, right? So they hit a lot of even testosterone, growth hormone, growth factors. So they hit a lot of different marks. I will hang out on my vibration plate for a while at some point today just to get my lymphatic system moving. I have promised myself I will hop on my Carol bike and do a 10-minute session, even though my score will be crappy because my quads are dead from what I did this morning. My glutes and my quads are burnt from this morning. But nevertheless, I'm sticking to my schedule. And then, I mean, there's all the supplements. I've got a Beacon 40 light in the corner over there that's helping with my cognitive function. I mean, it is when you think about it a little bit comical, right? Like all these different things that we do. I recently got sent, and I can't even believe I'm going to mention this. Like, I mean, I've got my Lila Quantum Cube next to my, not that part. I've got my Lila Quantum stuff that I use that I really like, but I got sent these EMF rocks last week.
Yeah,
Um,
I had him on the show.
yeah. So, I mean, and I'm a skeptical Susie over here. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I've had 2 bags of those rocks sitting at the head of my bed, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that it sure seems like my HRV's gotten better. But the other, and maybe the first biohack is while I'm in my bed, I've got an 8 sleep pad on my mattress so that it keeps my mattress cool. My mattress is an Essentia mattress, so it's a very, kind of doesn't emit any nasty VOCs and whatever. Then I've got a grounding sheet on top of that.
What type of mattress did you say it is?
Essentia. It's
Essential.
Essentia. It'll set you back some money, but it is literally one of the best investments I've ever made in my sleep.
So it sounds like you got at least like 100 grand of devices and products and
That many. I don't have, no, because, I mean, I don't know that I have 100 grand. I have a lot, but the sauna that I have is one of those small little tent saunas. The Carol bike's an investment, the Katsu's an art. These are investment pieces. And I do, the way I speak to my clients and my community about them is these are investments you're making in your future, right? These aren't fads that are going to go away tomorrow. They're not one trick monkeys. Like when you
right.
look at something like Katsu, it is going to set you back a couple $1,000s, but you will use those whether you're an elite athlete or you're a grandparent. Like you will use those for the rest of your life. So to me, they are such a game changer, and I haven't even talked about all the cognitive kind of the Apollo and the Sensate and the this and the that. So there's lots of, there's so
I, ha-
much we can do.
I have a transcranial photobiomodulation device that
Yeah.
has red and near infrared on it. One thing I mentioned on the podcast yesterday was the Hoolest, HOOLEST. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a little
No.
device that fits in your pocket, and it's not a subscription service. It's a one-time payment. I think it's like 400 and something. You take it out, you put the little silicone conductors in there, you apply it right here, and we got the prime, so you can activate the trigeminal nerve and the median nerve if you want to. It works very well. It's like 2 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. We tried several of the
Sorry,
vagus nerve.
is it trigeminal nerve? Really?
So I don't use that part of it. I just use it for the
For
vagus.
the Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Because
there's the mini and the
is
prime. I got
interesting.
the prime, and that, so it has 5 different modes. And it tells you the hertz. Some of them are pulse, some of them are continuous, but it's really easy to use on the left side. Some people will experiment on the right side, but definitely feel more relaxed. Helps me get deeper sleep. And when I first started out, researching this stuff like 2005, I was really heavy into the supplements, and I still take supplements. Don't get me wrong, but with devices, like you said, I mean, you've already paid for it. It's not like take red light therapy. It does so many things. Like if you have an injury, anti-aging, energy levels, athletic performance and recovery. It helped wound healing,
Mitochondria. Yeah.
mitochondrial health, vascularization, nitric oxide. So I think that's great. But one device you mentioned, and I've seen it a number of times, haven't had time to research it, but the Carol bike. What is it and what makes it special?
Oh my God. It's so special. So Carol bike, and a lot of people will say, well, it's just a stationary bike. Why would I spend that kind of money? Well, it's the same amount of money as you would pay for what's that other one called? The starts with a P.
Peloton.
The Peloton. Yeah, apparently I need to lean into my nootropics and brain bioregulators today. So the Carol bike is an AI powered bike. And so what they figured out is that in a 10-minute workout, you can achieve what it would take a 45-minute workout to do. And this is in terms of metabolic improvements. So improvements in VO2 max, definitely for sedentary overweight people, in fat loss, in blood pressure metrics, in insulin sensitivity, like the whole 9 yards. And they have clinical trials that show this. And so what happens is you get on this bike, it's a 10-minute, it's a 10-minute, and they now have a 5-minute program. And it takes you through a 2-minute warm up, a 20-second all out sprint, another 2-minute kind of recovery, another 20-second all out sprint, and then a final recovery. In those sprints, what the bike does is it increases the tension based on your output. And so, to put it bluntly, block your children's ears, it sucks large. It never gets any easier. It's always really, really kind of hard, but it's only 20 seconds. And so, and you can do anything for 20 seconds if you, although it is the longest 20 seconds, it's so funny. Like you're pushing through this sprint and you look at the clock and it's like, how am I only at 9 seconds? Like this is impossible. And it talks to you and it gives you back a lot of information about your output of power and the watts and now they've got like a chest strap so that it measures your heart rate and your recovery. It gives you an indication of how high you went and how fast you recovered. And over time, so you do this like 3 times a week. And it is remarkable, the improvements that you'll see. And it's another one, it's a bit like the Katsu, that it can be applied to elite athletes and it could be applied to sedentary people who haven't worked out in 50 years, right?
It
Because
kind of sounds like the cardio version of the ARX machine.
kind of, exactly. And then it's got different workouts. There's the one, if you really want to be mean to yourself, like let's say you were saying before, you get to buy something if you did all the things. If you want to punish yourself for not doing your basics, you could do the fat burner. And the fat burner is, I haven't done it in a while. I think it's 38-second sprints.
Wow.
So it's, maybe 20 minutes, maybe it's 15. And so you're doing these little 8-second sprints split up by maybe 20 to 30 seconds of recovery. Honestly, it's completely miserable, but it is incredibly effective because, they call it the fat burner. I mean, by the time you're done, there is not a molecule of glycogen left in your thighs. Like nothing, even in the 10-minute one that I mentioned earlier, the beauty of it is it's a glycogen depleting workout, right? So you're emptying the stores of glycogen in your largest muscle groups, which means that your body is now ready to replenish. That improves the insulin sensitivity and it just creates all these metabolic cascades.
And how much will one of these set you back?
It's about $2,500.
Okay, that's
Right.
not too bad.
And we've all got discount. Yeah, I've got a discount code for it, save people a few bucks, but frankly, it's the price of a Peloton and you can do a Peloton workout on it if you want. So to me, way better investment because it'll last you a lot longer. You'll use it differently as you move through at different times of your life, and everybody in the family can use it. Right. So it is a bit of a subscription, but the subscription is very inexpensive. It allows you 5 users and lots of different features and stuff. Anyway, so here we are. You're welcome, Carol.
There you go. And in terms of molecular hydrogen, do you have a molecular hydrogen machine?
I have a Brown's gas machine.
That's what I have, the AquaCure.
Yeah, that's the exact same one I have. For molecular hydrogen, I'll use the tablets when I travel for sure. Although curiously, right now, I'm using the Brown's gas, but I'm not using any molecular hydrogen because I just did a gut test. So that's the other, as people know, that's the other obsession of people like us. We do lots of tests. And it showed that I've got major overgrowth of bacteria in my gut that produce a lot of hydrogen. And they actually produce hydrogen sulfide, which is a major issue. So I need to cut back on all sulfur things. So that amazing glutathione supplement that I was taking is kind of on the shelf for the time being. And I'm not using any hydrogen at this moment, just while I kind of rebalance things.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, hydrogen sulfide, it puts you in a state of torpor and it's a mitochondrial uncoupler. Like it can actually lower body temperature. And so I've had people where at first I thought it was their thyroid, but we get their labs back and their levels are good. And we test their gut and they have hydrogen dominant SIBO.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think I have SIBO because that's further up the track, but this was definitely in the lower GI. But yeah, it's actually, I can tell you about the test and maybe you can share it with your audience later. It's
Sure.
a very cool, very new kind of gut test. It's very affordable, so people can do it and then repeat it. So for example, I did a run of Akkermansia, the Regulum probiotics. And, a lot of people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. Because I had gotten a test back last year saying that my Akkermansia was pretty much non-existent.
Right.
And shockingly, my Akkermansia is now in range, which
That's
is pretty
awesome.
cool, right?
Because
So it's cool to see that, to see how products can really raise the bar on stuff.
I interviewed last week the fairy gut mother,
Oh
Carly
yeah.
Smith, and we were talking about how, there's such debate as to some of the benefits of probiotics are, temporary, interacting with the dendritic cells and the toll-like receptors. But I do think that there is, as long as you have the right terrain, there can be colonization, like what you saw with Akkermansia, if you give it the right food.
Right. So what Pendulum recommended, and I think people don't talk about enough, is if you're going to use their Akkermansia supplement, then you need to take they have a phenol boost supplement as well, which is it's feeding the Akkermansia what they want, and you can be eating berries and stuff like that to get those phenols. But while you're doing a run of the actual probiotic, the supplement, I would really encourage people to also be supplementing the phenols at the same time, so that you're giving those bugs the best opportunity to colonize and to get established. Like, you want to go the extra mile for these guys.
Absolutely. And with the Akkermansia, did you notice? I mean, you look lean regardless, but did you notice an increase in metabolic rate and decrease in body fat?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I started taking it, I definitely noticed that I was like, wow, like because I've used a couple of the GLP-1 agonists in the past, and I was like, whoa, I kind of almost feel, without the nausea or anything, but I feel a little bit like I'm using tirzepatide right now or semaglutide, and it was really interesting to me that I could actually, and because I didn't expect it. Right? It's like the MF rocks. I had, like, never mind placebo. Like, I absolutely do not believe they're going to do anything. And next thing you know, my HRV is looking better and my deep sleep's getting a bit better. And I'm like, oh, come on. Now I'm going to go bury them in my basement and see what happens. But getting back to the Akkermansia, it was less noticeable over time. And I think we do, just like we acclimate to GLP-1s over time, you do acclimate to it after a while, but definitely, at least at the beginning, I could really feel that shift.
So, and one thing I focus on a lot with patients and clients is body temperature. And
Mm.
so, when someone has hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid axis dysfunction, along with gut dysfunction, oftentimes their body temperature is lower. And that's one reason why, things like the biomat and the sauna help us feel better, is because they're increasing core body temperature. Those proteins are working better. Um, but I was wondering, do you have any protocols, or have you seen any protocols that help to improve body temperature, maybe by directly impacting the thyroid or indirectly through the gut and the HPAT?
Yeah, I think you've just said it right there. It's going to vary. It's going to depend on what's going on. Like, this whole gut microbiome link to lower body temperature it's a bit new to me. And my body temperature has been low for a while. So, I don't know how long this has been going on, but as I said at the beginning of the episode, like, my gut microbiome has not been optimal, really. Like, it's been a struggle my whole life. So there's a possibility that this overgrowth or this imbalance, let's say, like right now it's fairly pronounced, like my bifidobacteria is in the toilet, literally. And just like I've got like all the wrong, like, I had really good scores in some areas, but really not great in others. So I'm like a broken record. Like, I have a very large Facebook community. I've got a smaller membership community, and every podcast I'm on, I'm like a broken record. It depends. Like, you've got to, people see low body temperature, they instantly jump to thyroid. And for good reason. Like, very often it's thyroid. And I would say probably it's the climate, the environment that we're in right now, with all the non-native EMFs, with all the toxins, the thyroid's taking a hit every which way you turn. So there's a really good chance your thyroid's not pulling its weight. But not to look at the gut microbiome, not to look at other stuff that could be impairing, not to look at adrenals that are exhausted. So they're kind of sending a signal to the thyroid, like, slow down, dude. We just can't keep up with you. Like, all of these things have to be looked at to really get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, and I see that with guys, especially, they automatically assume testosterone's low, and that's why
Yeah.
their libido is low. But, I've seen guys whose testosterone is great, 800, 900, and their free testosterone is good, but their thyroid is low, or their antibodies are high, or their T3 is high. And so, all your biochemical reactions slow down. And then, 20% of your T4 is converted to T3 in the gut. I think 50 to 60% is converted in the liver, and the gut and the liver, talk back and forth. So if you have an imbalance there, that's going to directly impact thyroid levels. And if you have, dysbiosis, that's going to create inflammation, activate cortisol. So it's also interconnected. And a lot of people, like I know locally, there are clinics popping up all over the place with just hormone replacement therapy. Like that's all they do. They won't look at any other system. They won't look at the gut. They won't look at environmental toxicities. And I mean, you and I both know if you put hormones into a body that's extremely toxic, say mycotoxins, metals, you're going to get marginal results. You may even get worse.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing on libido, and it bears mentioning, like there was a guy very early days in my Facebook community who was, he was on there and he was like, my libido's in the toilet and blah, 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 and testosterone, and that's not working. And, there's even a testogen, there's a testicular bioregulator that can help with testosterone and stuff. And he's like, nothing's working. And then he kind of disappeared for a while. And then he came back like a couple months later, goes, fix my problem, change my girlfriend, which is a horrible way to put it. But it turns out that in his case, his relationship was not where it needed to be. He was in a crappy relationship. His libido tanked because, I mean, and we talk about guys being, not that selective. They're always ready. They don't really care. They're not as emotionally invested. I think there's only some truth to that. Like at the end of the day, if we're going to look at the whole picture, we have to look at emotions. We have to look at mindset. We have to look at what's happening in a person's life. This libido thing drives me nutty especially because there's a peptide for that, right? There's PT141 that also supposedly works on women. It's not going to work if the fundamental problem is that you're not in a good relationship, or you're disengaged, or there's much deeper, more important things that need to be taken care of. So, it should be and certainly in that area, it should be the last thing, right? And, when you mention testosterone, you have to look at lifestyle for men. Like, are they exercising? Are they sleeping? How are they eating? Because all of these things are going to tank your hormones.
Yeah, I mean, I have guys at my gym, and they want to know like what steroids I'm on. I'm like, I'm not on any. And and you only work out 4 times a week. I'm like, well, how many times do you work out? 7, sometimes twice a day. How many hours a night do you sleep? 5. Well, there's your answer right there. Like your anabolic potential just went.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
all the
sure.
learning, obviously you're constantly learning like myself. All the learning you've done, what's something today you wish you would have known maybe 10 years ago, or at the beginning of your journey?
Well, that's one thing I wish I'd known. I'm not sure I can answer that particularly. I think the one thing that I think we have to continually remember is to stay curious, not to make assumptions, to trust your body, right? Trust it both to tell you what's really going on, and trust it to tell you when something's not right, right? And when something is right, even though, one of the big mistakes we all make is we treat labs. And time again, every practitioner has their butt handed back to them because you're treating a lab, and it's a reminder, and you've got to look at the person. You've got to talk to the person. Like you say, like with testosterone numbers, they could be high, they could be low, but if your person's feeling amazing or terrible, the numbers mean nothing. So I just think that, for me, what I think is the most important for all of us is to keep an open mind, to be curious, and at the same time, resist the temptation to listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, because everybody's got an opinion. Make sure that whoever you've chosen as your source of information, your guru, has some chops, right? And is willing to say every once in a while, I was wrong. This is what I believe. This is why I believed it back then. This is what we've learned since then. There's new information. And therefore, here's the new thing I'm going to teach you. I'm going to share with you today. And too often I see people getting crucified for this. And I honestly think it's the first thing you should look for in anyone who's helping to guide you is an acknowledgement and the humility to know that we don't know it all and we're all learning.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Back then, in 2014, 2015, 2013, I said X, Y, and Z. I now know that to be wrong. Here's why. Yeah, people give you a hard time about it. But, if your doctor or healthcare provider is not saying those things, that means they're not learning. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, we all make mistakes. And, we did the best we could with the knowledge we had at the time. So it wasn't
Yeah.
technically even a mistake.
No, it wasn't a mistake. It was what you knew, right? And
Right.
so,
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thanks for taking the time out for the interview. Where can people find you?
well, first of all, thank you. This has been fabulous. Great conversation. I appreciate it. And where people can find me is, well, I have a podcast of my own, which hopefully will get you on there pretty soon, called the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. The on Instagram at Nathalie Niddam, just my name. And then the next place to look is my website, natniddam.com. And that's where you can find information about my membership community, which is the BSP community. And then there's, sign up for the newsletter. Always lots of cool stuff in there every week. And then on Facebook, if you want to go to the wild, wild west that is Facebook these days, it's the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. And hopefully we can have you back on in the future for some updates.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a blessed day.
You too.